Hi, and welcome back to Crochet Every Day with Judy. Today we're continuing reading from the Arabian Nights, and we're starting with the story of the fisherman. There was an aged fisherman who was so poor that he could scarcely earn as much as would maintain himself, his wife, and 3 children. He went every day to fish betimes in the morning, and imposed it as a law upon himself not to cast his nets above 4 times a day. Excuse me. He went one morning by moonlight, and coming to the seaside, undressed himself. 3 several times did he cast his net and have a heavy haul. Yet to his indescribable disappointment and despair, the first proved to be an ass, the second a basket full of stones, and the third a mass of mud and shells. As day now began to appear, he said his prayers, for he was a good Mussulman, and commended himself and his needs to his Creator. Having done this, he cast his nets the 4th time, and drew them as formerly with great difficulty. But instead of fish, found nothing in them but a vessel of yellow copper, having the impression of a seal upon it. This turn of fortune rejoiced him. "I will sell it," said he, "to the founder, and with the money buy a measure of corn." He examined the vessel on all sides, and shook it to try if its contents made any noise, but heard nothing. This circumstance, with the impression of the seal upon the leaden cover, made him think it enclosed something precious. To try this, he took a knife and opened it. He turned the mouth downward, but nothing came out, which surprised him extremely. He placed it before him, but while he viewed it attentively, there came out a very thick smoke, which obliged him to retire 2 or 3 paces back. The smoke ascended to the clouds, and extending itself along the sea and upon the shore, formed a great mist, which we may well imagine filled the fisherman with astonishment. When the smoke was all out of the vessel, it reunited, and became a solid body, of which was formed a genie twice as high as the greatest of giants. At the sight of such a monster, the fisherman would fain have fled, but was so frightened that he could not move. The genie regarded the fisherman with a fierce look, and exclaimed in a terrible voice, "Prepare to die, for I surely will kill thee." "Ah," replied the fisherman, "why would you kill me? Did I not just now set you at liberty, and have you already forgotten my kindness?" "Yes, I remember it," said the genie, "but that shall not save thy life. I have only one favor to grant thee." "And what is that?" asked the fisherman. "It is," answered the genie, "to give thee thy choice in what manner thou wouldst have me put thee to death." "But wherein have I offended you?" demanded the fisherman. "Is that your reward for the service I have rendered you?" "I cannot treat thee otherwise," said the genie, "and that thou mayest know the reason, hearken to my story. I am one of those rebellious spirits that oppose the will of heaven. Solomon, the son of David, commanded me to acknowledge his power and to submit to his commands. I refused, and told him I would rather expose myself to his resentment than swear fealty as he required. To punish me, he shut me up in this copper vessel, and that I might not break my prison, he himself stamped upon this leaden cover his seal with the great name of God engraven upon it. He then gave the vessel to a genie with orders to throw me into the sea. During the first 100 years of my imprisonment, I swore that if anyone should deliver me before the expiration of that period, I would make him rich. During the second, I made an oath that I would open all the treasures of the earth to anyone that might set me at liberty. In the third, I promised to make my deliverer a potent monarch, to be always near him in spirit, and to grant him every day 3 requests of whatsoever nature they might be. At last, being angry, or rather mad, to find myself a prisoner so long, I swore that if anyone should deliver me, I would kill him without mercy, and grant him no other favor but to choose the manner of his death. And therefore, since thou hast delivered me today, I give thee that choice." The fisherman was extremely grieved, not so much for himself as on account of his 3 children, and bewailed the misery they must be reduced to by his death. He endeavored to appease the genie, and said, "Alas, be pleased to take pity on me, in consideration of the service I have done you." "I have told thee already," replied the genie. "It is for that very reason I must kill thee. Make haste, and tell me how you wish to die." Necessity is the mother of invention. The fisherman bethought himself of a stratagem. "Since I must die, then," he said to the genie, "I submit to the will of heaven. But before I choose the manner of my death, I conjure you, by the great name which was engraven upon the seal of the prophet Solomon, the son of David, to answer me truly the question I am going to ask you." The genie, finding himself obliged to a positive answer by this adjuration, trembled, and replied to the fisherman, "Ask what thou wilt, but make haste." "I wish to know," asked the fisherman, if you were actually in this vessel. Dare you swear it by the name of the great God?" "Yes," replied the genie, "I do swear by that great name that I was." "In good faith," answered the fisherman, "I cannot believe you. The vessel is not capable of holding one of your feet, and how should it be possible that your whole body could lie in it?" "It is possible," replied the genie, "that thou dost not believe me after the solemn oath I have taken." "Truly not I," said the fisherman, "nor will I believe you unless you go into the vessel again." Upon which the body of the genie dissolved and changed itself into smoke, extending as before upon the seashore, and at last being collected, it began to re-enter the vessel, which it continued to do till no part remained out, when immediately the fisherman took the cover of lead and speedily replaced it on the vessel. "Genie," cried he, "now it is your turn to beg my favor, but I shall throw you into the sea whence I took you, and then I will build a house upon the shore, where I will reside, and give notice to all fishermen who come to throw in their nets to beware of such a wicked genie as thou art, who hast made an oath to kill him that shalt set thee at liberty." "Open the vessel," begged the genie, "give me my liberty, and I promise to satisfy thee to thy own content." "Thou art a traitor," replied the fisherman. "I should deserve to lose my life if I were such a fool as to trust thee." "Hear me one word more," cried the genie. "I promise to do thee no hurt. Nay, far from that, I will show thee a way to become exceedingly rich." The hope of delivering himself from poverty prevailed with the fisherman. "I could listen to thee," said he, "were there any credit to be given to thy word. Swear to me, by the great name of God, that you will faithfully perform what you promise, and I will open the vessel. I do not believe you will dare to break such an oath." The genie swore to him, upon which the fisherman immediately took off the covering of the vessel, and at once the smoke ascended, and the genie, having resumed his form, kicked the vessel into the sea. "Be not afraid, fisherman," said the genie. "I only did it to see if thou wouldst be alarmed. But to convince thee that I am in earnest, take thy nets and follow me." They passed by the town and came to the top of a mountain, from whence they descended into a vast plain, which brought them to a lake that lay in the midst of 4 hills. When they reached the side of the lake, the genie said to the fisherman, "Cast in thy nets and catch fish." The fisherman did not doubt of taking some, because he saw a great number in the water, but he was extremely surprised when he found they were of 4 colors, white, red, blue, and yellow. He threw in his nets and brought out one of each color. Having never seen the like before, he could not but admire them, and judging that he might get a considerable sum for them, he was very joyful. "Carry those fish," said the genie to him, "and present them to thy sultan. He will give thee more money for them. Thou mayest come every day to fish in this lake. But I give thee warning not to throw in thy nets above once a day, otherwise thou wilt repent." Having spoken thus, he struck his foot upon the ground, which opened, and after it had swallowed him, closed up again. The further adventures of the fisherman. The fisherman being resolved to follow the genie's advice, forbore casting in his nets a second time, and returned to the town very well satisfied. He went immediately to the sultan's palace to offer his fish. The sultan was much surprised when he saw the 4 fish which the fisherman presented. He took them up, one after another, and viewed them with attention. "Take those fish," said he to his vizier, "and carry them to the cook. I cannot imagine but that they must be as good as they are beautiful, and give the fisherman 400 pieces of gold." The fisherman, who had never seen so much money, could scarcely believe his good fortune, but thought the whole must be a dream, until he found it otherwise by being able to provide necessaries for his family. As soon as the cook had cleaned the fish, she put them upon the fire in a frying pan with oil, and when she thought them fried enough on one side, she turned them upon the other. But oh, monstrous prodigy! Scarcely were they turned, when the wall of the kitchen divided, and a young lady of wonderful beauty entered from the opening. She was clad in flowered satin with pendants in her ears, a necklace of large pearls, and bracelets of gold set with rubies, with a rod in her hand. She moved toward the frying pan, to the great amazement of the cook, who continued fixed by the sight, and striking one of the fish with the end of the rod, said, "Fish, fish, are you on duty?" The fish having answered nothing, she repeated these words, and then the 4 fish lifted up their heads and replied, "Yes, yes, if you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. If you fly, we conquer and are content." As soon as they had finished these words, the lady overturned the frying pan and returned into the open part of the wall, which closed immediately and became as it was before. The cook was greatly frightened at what had happened, and coming a little to herself, went to take up the fish that had fallen on the hearth, but found them blacker than coal and not fit to be carried to the sultan. "Alas," said she, "what will become of me? If I tell the Sultan what I have seen, I am sure he will not believe me, but will be enraged against me." While she was thus bewailing herself, the Grand Vizier entered and asked her if the fish were ready. She told him all that had occurred, which we may easily imagine astonished him. But without speaking a word of it to the Sultan, he invented an excuse that satisfied him, and sending immediately for the fisherman, bade him bring 4 more such fish, which the fisherman promised to do on the morrow. Accordingly, the fisherman threw in his nets betimes next morning, took 4 fish like the former, and brought them to the vizier at the hour appointed. The minister took them himself, carried them to the kitchen, and shut himself up with the cook. She cleaned them and put them on the fire as she had done the 4 others the day before, and when they were fried on one side and she had turned them upon the other, the vizier became a witness of the same events as the cook had narrated to him. "This is too wonderful and extraordinary," said he, "to be concealed from the Sultan. I will inform him of this prodigy." The Sultan, being much surprised, sent immediately for the fisherman and said to him, "Friend, cannot you bring me 4 more such fish?" The fisherman replied, "If your majesty will be pleased to allow me until tomorrow, I will do it." He caught 4 fish and brought them to the Sultan, who was so much rejoiced that he gave the fisherman 400 pieces of gold. The Sultan had the fish carried into his closet with all that was necessary for frying them, and having shut himself up with the vizier, the minister put them into the pan, and when they were fried on one side, turned them upon the other. Then the wall of the closet opened, but instead of the young lady, there came out a black, in the habit of a slave, and of a gigantic stature, with a great green staff in his hand. He advanced toward the pan, and touching one of the fish with his staff, said with a terrible voice, "Fish, are you on duty?" At these words, the fish raised up their heads and answered, "Yes, yes, we are. If you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we pay ours. If you fly, we conquer and are content." The fish had no sooner finished these words than the black threw the pan into the middle of the closet and reduced the fish to a coal. Having done this, he retired fiercely, and entering again into the aperture, it closed, and the wall appeared just as it did before. The Sultan sent for the fisherman, and on hearing where the fish had been caught, he commanded all his court to take horse, and the fisherman served them for a guide. They all ascended the mountain, and at the foot of it they saw, to their great surprise, a vast plain that nobody had observed till then, and at last they came to the lake. The Sultan stood upon the bank, beholding the fish with admiration. On his demanding of his courtiers if it were possible they had never seen this lake, which was within so short a distance of the town, they all answered that they had never so much as heard of it. "Since you all agree that you never heard of it, and as I am no less astonished than you are at this novelty, I am resolved not to return to my palace till I learn how this lake came here, and why all the fish in it are of 4 colors." Having spoken thus, he ordered his court to encamp, and immediately his pavilion and the tents of his household were planted upon the banks of the lake. Resolved to withdraw alone from the camp to discover the secret of the portents that so disturbed his mind, the Sultan bade his Grand Vizier inform the court that illness accounted for his absence until such time as he should return. The Grand Vizier endeavored to divert the Sultan from his design, but all to no purpose. The Sultan was resolved. He put on a suit fit for walking and took his scimitar, and as soon as he found that all was quiet in the camp, went out alone. As the sun arose, he saw before him, at a considerable distance, a vast building of black polished marble, covered with fine steel, as smooth as glass. Being highly pleased that he had so speedily met with something worthy of his curiosity, he advanced toward the gate, which was partially open. Though he might immediately have entered, yet he thought it best to knock. This he did again and again, but no one appearing, he was exceedingly surprised. At last he entered, and when he came within the porch, he cried, "Is there no one here to receive a stranger who comes in for some refreshment as he passes by?" But though he spoke very loudly, he was not answered. The silence increased his astonishment. He came into a spacious court and looked on every side for inhabitants, but discovered none. He then entered several grand halls which were hung with silk tapestry, the alcoves and sofas being covered with stuffs of Mecca, and the porches with the richest stuffs of India mixed with gold and silver. Being tired with walking, he sat down on a veranda which had a view over the garden, when suddenly he heard the voice of one complaining in lamentable tones. He listened with attention and heard these words, "O Fortune, thou hast not suffered me long to enjoy a happy lot. Forbear to persecute me, and by a speedy death put an end to my sorrows." The Sultan rose up, advanced toward the place whence came the voice, and opening the door of a great hall, pushed aside a curtain. A handsome young man, richly habited, was seated upon a throne. His face was sorrowful. The Sultan drew near and saluted him. The young man returned the salutation by an inclination of his head, at the same time saying, "My lord, I should rise to receive you, but I am hindered by sad necessity, and therefore I hope you will not be offended." "My lord," replied the Sultan, "I feel highly honored by your good opinion of me. As to the reason of your not rising, whatever your apology be, I heartily accept it. Being drawn hither by your complaints, I came to offer you my help. But inform me the meaning of the lake near the palace, where the fish are of 4 colors, whose this castle is, how you came to be here, and why you are alone." Instead of answering these questions, the young man began to weep bitterly. "How inconstant is fortune," cried he. "She takes pleasure to pull down those she has raised." At these words, lifting up his robe, he showed the Sultan that he was a man only from the head to the girdle, and that the other half of his body was black marble. You may easily imagine that the Sultan was amazed when he saw the deplorable condition of the young man. "That which you show me," said he, "fills me with horror. I am impatient to hear your history, and I am persuaded that the lake and the fish make some part of it. Therefore, I conjure you to relate it." "I will not refuse your request," replied the young man, "though I cannot comply without renewing my grief." Thereupon, he narrated the story of the young king of the Black Isles. We'll have to wait till tomorrow to find out what happened to him. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.